Or will you
Frickin'
fight back?
Over our lifetimes, we've all contributed to climate change. Actions, choices, and behaviours will have led to an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that that's quite a powerful thought, but it does have the potential to make us feel guilty when we think about decisions we might have made around where to travel to, how often, and how. About the energy that we choose to use in our homes or in our workplaces, or quite simply the lifestyles that we lead and enjoy. But we can also turn that thought on its head and think that if we've had such a profound but a negative impact on our climate already, then we have an opportunity to influence the amount of future climate change that we will need to adapt to. So we have a choice. We can either choose to start to take climate change seriously and significantly cut and mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions, and then we will have to adapt to less of the climate change impacts in future. Alternatively, we can continue to really ignore the climate change problem. But if we do that, we are also choosing to adapt to very much more powerful climate impacts in future. And not only that, as people who live in countries with high per capita emissions, we're making that choice on behalf of others as well. But the choice that we don't have is a no climate change future. So this is a graph of the CO2 emissions up the left-hand side from fossil fuel and industry, and time from before the Industrial Revolution out towards the present day. And what's immediately striking about this is that emissions have been growing exponentially. If we focus in on a shorter period of time from 1950, we have established in 1988 the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Rio Earth Summit in 1992. Then rolling on a few years, in 2009 we had the Copenhagen Accord, where it established avoiding a 2-degree temperature rise in keeping with the science and on the basis of equity. And then in 2012, we had the Rio +20 event. And all the way through, during all of these meetings and many others as well, emissions have continued to rise. And the problem with these extremes, and not just the temperature extremes, but also the extremes in terms of storms and other climate impacts, is our infrastructure is just not set up to deal with these sorts of events. So our roads and our rail networks have been designed to last for a long time and withstand only certain amounts of impacts in different parts of the world. And this is going to be extremely challenged. Our power stations are expected to be cooled by water at a certain temperature to remain effective and resilient. And our buildings are designed to be comfortable within a particular temperature range. And this is all going to be significantly challenged under a 4-degree type scenario. So if we take food security, for example, maize and wheat yields in some parts of the world are expected to be up to 40% lower under a 4-degree scenario. Rice, up to 30% lower. This will be absolutely devastating for global food security. So all in all, the kinds of impacts anticipated under this 4 degrees centigrade scenario are going to be incompatible with global organized living. So in other words, because of the lights and the projectors that are on in this room right now, the CO2 that is going into our atmosphere as a result of that electricity consumption lasts a very long time. Some of it will be in our atmosphere for a century, maybe much longer. It will accumulate, and greenhouse gases tend to be cumulative. Another issue that we really need to grapple with is the issue of well-being and equity. There are many parts of the world where the standard of living needs to rise, but with energy systems currently reliant on fossil fuel, as those economies grow, so will emissions. And now, if we're all constrained by the same amount of carbon budget, That means that if some parts of the world's emissions are needing to rise, then other parts of the world's emissions need to reduce. So that poses very significant challenges for wealthy nations. Because according to our research, if you're in a country where per capita emissions are really high, so North America, in Europe, in Australia, emission reductions of the order of 10% per year and starting immediately will be required for a good chance of avoiding the 2-degree target. Let me just put that into context. The economist Nicholas Stern said that emission reductions of more than 1% per year had only ever been associated with economic recession or upheaval. So this poses huge challenges for the issue of economic growth. Because if we have our high carbon infrastructure in place, it means that if our economies grow, then so do our emissions. Economic growth needs to be exchanged, at least temporarily, for a period of planned austerity in wealthy nations. This is a really difficult message to take, because what it suggests is that we really need to do things differently. This is not about just incremental change. This is about doing things differently, about whole system change, and sometimes it's about doing less things. And this applies to all of us, whatever sphere of influence we have. So it could be from writing to our local politician, to talking to our boss at work, or being the boss at work, or talking with our friends and family, or just quite simply changing our own lifestyles. Thank you.